At Christmas dinner, my son asked me if the hospital had sent the surgery date yet. My daughter-in-law interjected, "Yes, but I used that money to plan my mom's birthday." My son was speechless. I just smiled and asked him back, "Don't you know who really needs that surgery?" At that instant, his face went instantly pale. But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching this video from. We'd love to know how far our revenge stories reach. Outside, the winter snow fell heavily, but inside our house, the Christmas party atmosphere was warm and lively. I glanced around the living room. My daughter, Chloe, looked radiant. She was chatting with some close friends of my son, Michael, and her clear, infectious smile comforted my soul. Seeing her so healthy made me silently thank heaven. The stomach pains that had tormented her so much now seemed like a distant memory, a nightmare that had passed. The center of attention that night, however, was none other than Tiffany, my daughter-in-law. She wore an emerald green Gucci velvet dress and moved constantly between groups of guests, a bottle of expensive wine in hand, skillfully refilling empty glasses with a dazzling smile that never faded for a second. Only Michael, my son, was a dissonant note in that festive melody. He was trying to offer cordial smiles, attempting to chat with some colleagues, but his eyes couldn't hide his unease and worry. He paced back and forth, and every now and then shot me an anxious and urgent look, a look only a mother could understand. When the party was at its peak, Michael finally couldn't hold back anymore. He quickly approached me, trying to block the view of others, and whispered with a voice as tense as a string, "Mom, has the hospital sent the surgery date yet? I'm so nervous." I hadn't even had a chance to open my mouth to reassure him when a sharp voice cut in beside us. Tiffany had appeared out of nowhere, clinging to Michael's arm. She spoke loudly, enough for some curious guests to turn and look. "Yes, they sent it. I got the email last week." A brief silence fell over the space around us. Tiffany paused for a moment, her gaze fixed on me, sharp and defiant. Then she slowly turned towards Chloe, who was a short distance away, and the smile on her face grew even brighter, to the point of being chilling. "But I thought about it," she continued in a sugary, false tone. "Chloe looks so good, I don't think it's that urgent, so I used that money to throw my mom a big birthday party. She deserves it, right? Honey?" Her words fell like a bucket of ice water in the middle of the festive atmosphere. The air became thick, hard to breathe. I saw Chloe freeze, her smile erased from her face, replaced by an expression of surprise and deep pain. Nearby guests exchanged glances, and murmurs began to arise. For a moment, rage and pain hit me in the chest, but I held it in. This was not the time to be weak. Calmly, I placed my wine glass on the table. I turned fully to face Tiffany. Her eyes still gleamed with self-satisfaction. My voice was not loud or aggressive, but it was clear and firm, enough for her and everyone nearby to hear it. "Really? You don't know who actually needs surgery?" Tiffany's beautiful face lost all color. Her triumphant smile froze on her lips, becoming grotesque and twisted. She shot a quick glance at Michael, seeking help, an explanation. But in her eyes, there was no longer jealousy or pride, but total confusion and absolute fear. Tiffany's completely disoriented eyes dragged me mentally back to memories of several months ago. At that moment, I was no longer the mother-in-law standing in a room full of people, but I was again Rosa Mae Johnson, a widowed woman who only wanted to take care of her small home, the same woman who witnessed the first cracks in what seemed like a perfect family picture. It all didn't start with cruel words or terrible secrets. On the contrary, it began with the smallest, warmest things. I still clearly remember Tiffany's first days as a daughter-in-law. She was like a fresh breeze that arrived in a house that had become somewhat dull. I took her hand and taught her in detail how to prepare a pot of chicken soup with the family recipe, that flavor that had accompanied the Johnsons for generations. I showed her how to feel the tenderness of the chicken, how to season so the broth was clear and naturally sweet. We laughed together in the kitchen. I remember one Sunday afternoon, we spent hours planting a bougainvillea on the balcony. We had dirt under our nails, but joy shone in our eyes. I truly believed I didn't have a daughter-in-law, but another daughter. The first strange sign appeared one afternoon. I came home from work, and the house was strangely silent. I saw Tiffany asleep on the sofa, her head tilted, her hair covering almost her entire face. Beside the armchair, the basket of clean laundry, freshly taken down from the clothesline, was still lying there, with some of Michael's shirts wrinkled. It was odd, because Tiffany had always been obsessive about order. I gently woke her, and she started, her eyes lost and tired. "Sorry, Mom. I don't know why I'm so sleepy lately," she said in a sleepy voice. I thought she was just exhausted, but these daytime naps became more frequent. She began to complain of persistent headaches, of a constant back pain that made her frown even at the dinner table. Her smile was no longer what it used to be. It was replaced by an exhausted expression that even makeup couldn't hide. Until one Sunday morning during family cleaning, while we were folding a large sheet, Tiffany raised her arms and the sleeve of her white blouse fell down. I froze. On the white fabric was a dark brown, dry, hardened stain spread across the cuff. It was blood. I felt a hollowness in my chest. I dropped the sheet, took her wrist, and asked in a trembling voice, "Tiffany, what is this, honey?" She pulled her arm away abruptly, with an expression of terror for an instant. She quickly pulled down her sleeve and forced a smile. "Oh, it's nothing, Mom. I must have cut myself cooking last night." But I knew she was lying. I'm a mother. I've treated many wounds. I knew it wasn't fresh blood or a kitchen cut. From that day on, an uneasiness began to gnaw at me. The worst was one afternoon when I was cleaning the couple's bathroom. I bent down to empty the trash can, and what I found under some used cotton pads made my blood run cold. 2 blisters of strong painkillers, completely empty, with the metallic wrappers crumpled furiously. I recognized the name. A controlled medication, by prescription only, for intense pain. I felt like someone was squeezing my heart. What is this girl enduring, and why does she have to hide it? That night I decided we had to talk frankly. I prepared a hot cup of chamomile tea, the kind of tea that has a calming effect, and took it to the living room where she was watching television. I sat beside her and carefully placed the cup in front of her. "Tiffany," I began, trying to make my voice sound as gentle as possible. "Is there something you're hiding from Mom? I've noticed you've been very strange lately. That blood stain on your sleeve the other day? Those pills in the bathroom? Don't hide it from me. If something's wrong, tell me. We'll solve it together." Tiffany didn't look at me. Her eyes remained fixed on the moving images on the screen, as if that were the only thing in the world. After a long while, she spoke in a somewhat annoyed and distant voice. "I already told you I'm fine. It's just lack of sleep from work. Those pills are for headaches, nothing more. Don't exaggerate so much, Mom." Her answer, especially those 2 words, "don't exaggerate," was like an ice wall that suddenly rose between us, stopping all my attempts at closeness dead in their tracks. I remained silent, saying nothing more. I knew that insisting would be useless, but looking at her, hunched on the sofa, an invisible, diffuse but growing fear began to take hold of me. I knew something very serious was happening to my daughter-in-law. Since then, the atmosphere in the house became heavy, so suffocating I felt like I couldn't breathe. Tiffany actively avoided me. She would come home from work and lock herself directly in her room. Dinner, which used to be the only family gathering of the day, became a silent and torturous act. She would sit, take a few bites of vegetables in silence, and after 5 or 10 minutes, she would get up with the same phrase as always, "I've eaten," and disappear behind her bedroom door again. Then I started to notice the change in Michael. My son, the boy I raised from a child, who used to light up the whole house with his smile, was now wilting before my eyes. The boy, who used to be cheerful and joke to make us all laugh, was now always quiet. He had lost weight. The office shirt that used to fit him perfectly now hung from his bony shoulders. The dark circles under his eyes were deep, clear traces of sleepless nights. Many times I would lie awake, unable to sleep, and suddenly, upon waking, I would notice a faint glow coming from the balcony. I carefully pulled back my bedroom curtain and looked outside. Michael was there alone, his back to the house. In the darkness, I could only see his solitary silhouette and the red tip of the cigarette in his hand. The cigarette, the one he had quit with such conviction since marrying Tiffany. He wasn't smoking. Just holding it between his fingers, letting the ash fall onto the cold tiles. He would stay there, motionless, looking at the empty street. Wrapped in the night, my son's back looked lonely and heavy. What burden was he carrying that forced him to seek refuge on that cold balcony and in that poisonous smoke? I couldn't stand that atmosphere anymore. I decided I had to do something to fix it. One night, I went to the market very early. I chose the freshest shrimp and calamari to prepare a seafood paella, that dish Tiffany had praised so much. I spent the entire afternoon in the kitchen, carefully sautéing each grain of saffron rice until it achieved a brilliant golden color, arranging the seafood meticulously on top of the pan. I even placed a small vase with roses in the center of the table. I just hoped a good meal could break the ice between us. When Tiffany returned from work, she stopped at the dining room doorway. She glanced at the meticulously set table with an empty, emotionless look. Then she said coldly, "I'm tired. I'm not eating dinner." She turned and went straight upstairs. The sound of her heels on the wooden stairs seemed distant and cruel to me. Michael sat at the table opposite his wife's empty chair. He looked at me, trying to force a crooked smile. "I'll take her plate up. She must be very tired." He served a generous portion of paella, carefully choosing the largest shrimp, and went upstairs. But minutes later, he returned with the plate untouched. He didn't say a word. He went to the kitchen and threw all the still warm rice into the trash. I stood there watching the scene, my heart shattered. His eyes at that moment were full of helplessness, sadness, and something broken inside. That fateful afternoon, I was in the backyard. I approached the rose bushes my late husband had planted with his own hands. Pruning dry branches and cutting wilted flowers always helped me calm down. It made me feel like he was still there. I was about to cut a decaying red rose when I heard Michael's car arrive. I looked at the clock several hours earlier than usual. He didn't enter through the front door. He used the side gate, the one we almost never open, and walked directly to the garden where I was. His appearance chilled me. His white shirt wrinkled, poorly buttoned, his tie loose, hanging from his neck. His face was gaunt, tired, and his eyes were red, swollen, as if he had cried a lot, too much. He didn't say anything, just walked towards me with a step so wobbly, as if he were drunk. And when he was a few feet from me, his legs buckled. My son, that tall, strong man, fell to his knees on the grass next to the thorny rose bushes. He buried his face in my gardening apron and burst into tears. They weren't just tears. They were deep, painful, broken sobs. I hadn't heard him like that since his father's death. The scissors I held in my hand fell to the stone ground with a sharp clank. I dropped everything and hugged him, wrapping my arms around his trembling head, my heart squeezed tight, unable to breathe. "Michael, what happened, son? Tell me." It took him a long time to lift his face. Trembling, he pulled a crumpled, damp, sweat-soaked paper from his pocket. He handed it to me. It was a medical result. His voice broke. Every word cut my soul. I took Tiffany to the doctor. "Mom," the doctor asked to speak with me alone. He took a deep breath, as if he needed to gather the last bit of courage he had left. He looked at me with those desperate eyes. "They found ovarian cancer. Early stage. The doctor said if she's not operated on in a few weeks, her chances of survival are very low." Then he squeezed my hand, his cold fingers digging into mine, looking at me pleadingly. The doctor begged me not to tell her for fear she'd break down. "Mom, what do we do? What do I do?" I looked at him, devastated, and felt my world also falling apart. That night, the entire house was enveloped in a thick silence. Upstairs, Tiffany had taken sedatives and fallen asleep early, unaware that a death sentence hung over her head. In the kitchen, only Michael and I sat face to face at the usual table. The yellow light fell on the crumpled exam paper between us. I looked at my son. He was there, motionless as a statue. His gaze lost, fixed on the sheet of paper, his hands clasped on the table, so tight they were white from the effort. I knew I couldn't let him collapse. I couldn't allow mother and son to face this tragedy alone. I took a deep breath, controlled the tremor in my chest, picked up the phone, and dialed a number I knew by heart. On the other end, Chloe's voice sounded still half asleep. "Mom, what's wrong? Why are you calling me at this hour?" I tried to sound as calm as possible, but emotion broke my voice a little. "Chloe, can you come home right now? It's urgent. Oh, and come in through the back door. Don't let Tiffany see you." Not even half an hour passed, and Chloe was already there. Chloe had put on a coat in a hurry, and her hair was still somewhat messy, But as soon as she saw her brother's devastated state, she knew something serious was wrong. Her smile instantly vanished, replaced by an expression of deep concern. "Mom, Michael, what happened?" The three of us sat around the kitchen table. The same place that just a few hours earlier had witnessed Michael's breakdown. With difficulty, he recounted everything again, his voice hoarse, choked. Each word seemed to drain his strength. Chloe listened with wide, horrified eyes. She covered her mouth with her hands to suppress a sob, but tears still welled up, hot, running down her cheeks. When Michael finished, a heavy silence covered everything. We looked at the estimated cost sheet for the operation that the hospital had sent by mail. The figure on the phone screen seemed like a gigantic mountain, crushing all hope that was just beginning to sprout. It was too much, far beyond what a working family like ours could afford. The silence lengthened. Only the constant ticking of the wall clock was heard, and each second echoed like a hammer blow on the nerves of the three of us. Time continued to run, and Tiffany's life also shortened with each tick. It was Chloe who broke that suffocating atmosphere, wiping her tears with the back of her hand and, with a firm and determined voice that surprised us, said, "We're going to sell the land in the town that Dad left me. I'll call Uncle there first thing tomorrow. I'm sure it'll be arranged quickly." Michael reacted immediately, distressed. "No, you're crazy. That land is your dowry. It's the only thing you have." Chloe gripped her brother's cold hand and shook her head forcefully. "Michael, listen to me. Money comes and goes, but a life doesn't. Tiffany is your wife, my sister-in-law, part of this family. Her life is the most important thing now." I looked at my two children, my heart squeezed, but full of pride. Then I spoke, my voice now firmer. "Mom still has a savings passbook. I'm going to empty it. It's okay. I'm still strong. I can keep working. The money can be resolved, but the most difficult problem was another. How were we going to get Tiffany, with how proud and sensitive she is, to accept such a large amount of money and go to the hospital without suspecting anything? She would never allow herself to be helped out of pity, and if she discovered the truth, would she be able to face it, or would she collapse and refuse treatment? The doctor's words still resonated in Michael's head. Under no circumstances should she know. Just at that moment, in the midst of desperation, a painful and risky plan began to take shape in my mind. I looked at my children and, in a low voice laden with weight, said, "We're going to have to lie. We're going to say that money is to treat Chloe." Michael and Chloe looked at me without reacting, but she, so intelligent and sensitive, immediately understood what I wanted to do. Her eyes shone through her tears. He continued my sentence, elaborating a plan so detailed it sent shivers down my spine. "Yes, I'll say my chronic gastritis worsened. Lately, I've been pale and tired. No one will suspect. I'll tell Tiffany the doctor asked for urgent surgery, that if I don't get operated on soon, it could turn into cancer." Michael looked at us with eyes full of doubt and worry. "But what if it doesn't work? What if she doesn't believe it? One lie always leads to many others. It scares me." I placed my hand on his shoulder, looking into his fear-filled eyes. "Michael, we have no other option. Do you want to see Tiffany sink, refuse treatment, and destroy herself? Fear can kill her faster than the disease. We have to do it. It's all to protect her." That very night, under the dim kitchen light, the three of us made a silent pact. We would carry this lie together. A lie born of love. From that fateful night, our house ceased to be a home. It became a stage, and we, who always lived in truth, became clumsy actors, forced to perform a sad drama of our own making every day. Every word, every gesture had to be carefully calculated for fear that a misstep would bring down the curtain. Chloe was the first to take on her role, and also the one who sacrificed the most. She started acting, she visited the house more frequently, but she no longer brought her usual joy. Her face was constantly creased. Sometimes she would hug her stomach and let out a whimper as if suffering constant pain. During meals, she adamantly refused the spicy or fried dishes she used to love, and only ate a few spoonfuls of white rice or light soup that I prepared for her in silence. Once, I even heard her vomit in the bathroom just as Tiffany was passing through the hallway. I knew she did it on purpose, seeing my daughter pretend to be sick, punish herself. It broke my heart as if someone were piercing me with a knife. Meanwhile, Michael and I began to meet in secret as if we were criminals in our own home. We no longer talked about money in the living room or kitchen. Our meeting place was the balcony at night or my study with the door tightly closed. We didn't even mention the topic directly. We communicated with notes, or in code, using phrases like, the medicine money for your sister, Chloe's expenses, or her thing. Every time we did it, I felt guilt and shame, as if we were deceiving the whole world. The tension filled every corner. One afternoon, while I was cooking, my uncle from the country called me. His voice sounded excited. "Niece, someone already wants to buy Chloe's land, and they're paying well." Michael was still at the office. Only Tiffany and I were home. My heart skipped a beat. I hurried to a corner of the kitchen, turning my back to the living room, and lowered my voice as much as possible. "That's great, Uncle. Please accept it for me." Yes. I need the money urgently, as soon as possible." I spoke like a machine, wanting to end the call quickly. Just then, I heard soft footsteps on the stairs. Tiffany was coming down from upstairs, saw me on the phone with a tense expression, and stopped at the foot of the stairs a few feet from me. She pretended to go to the refrigerator for a glass of water, but I knew it. I could feel her ears perked up, trying to catch every word. I hastened to say a few vague words and hung up, my heart still pounding in my chest. When I turned, she looked at me and smiled indifferently. "Who were you talking to, Mom? That made you so serious?" I had no choice but to let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, it was your uncle from the town. He was just calling to ask how we were." And so, that fateful night arrived. Michael had just managed to get a good sum of money by hastily selling the car he loved so much. He returned home, his face illuminated by a mix of joy and worry. After making sure Tiffany was in the bathroom, he took my arm and led me to the living room, where only a yellowish light shone. He took a thick brown paper envelope from his backpack and handed it to me. "Mom, keep half for now. Tomorrow I'll take the rest from the account, and you take it to advance the hospital payment for Chloe." We spoke in low voices, almost whispering, and casting nervous glances towards the bedroom door. As soon as Michael finished speaking, we heard the bathroom water suddenly stop. I startled, looked up, and froze. I felt my body completely paralyzed. The bedroom door was not closed as we thought. It was ajar, and through that crack, I saw a motionless silhouette. It was Tiffany. How long had she been there? How much had she heard? She had heard everything. In a moment of panic, my motherly instinct kicked in. I had to react quickly, save the situation no matter what. I deliberately raised my voice, changing the tone to one filled with concern and pain, addressing Michael, but with the intention that the person behind the door would hear me. "My God, is your sister that serious? The money doesn't matter. What's essential is to save her. Son, tell your sister not to worry, that her mother and brother are here to help her." As soon as I finished the sentence, the bedroom door flew open. Tiffany came out. She was still wearing her white towel, her hair dripping water onto the floor. She stared fixedly at the thick envelope I held in my hands with a sharp, knife-like gaze. Then she looked at Michael and me, who were paralyzed. She smiled, but that smile didn't reach her eyes. In her gaze, there was coldness, something unknown. "What's wrong that you and Mom are so tense? Money to help Sister Chloe. How lucky she is that everyone in this house goes out of their way to care for her and pamper her." Her voice sounded strangely sweet, but every word was loaded with an irony and bitterness that sent shivers down my spine. From that night on, Tiffany ceased to be the sweet daughter-in-law I knew. The fire of jealousy, fueled by suspicion and the feeling of being displaced, turned into a fierce inferno. She no longer screamed or asked questions. Now she preferred to torture us with gestures and small phrases, but with a venom that hurt like 1,000 stabs. Dinner became a genuine torture. The table, once a symbol of family unity, transformed into a silent battlefield. If I served Chloe a piece of salmon with care and said, "Eat some fish, honey, it's good for your health and to recover quickly," Tiffany, from the other end, would purse her lips and murmur loudly enough, "Some people are really sick. Others pretend so everyone serves and pampers them." Her words were like poisoned needles aimed directly at the souls of the three of us. Chloe lowered her head. Michael and I just looked at each other, unable to say anything, filled with pain. Tiffany began to make cruel and unfiltered comparisons. Once, when Michael returned from work, he brought a box of top-quality bird's nest, saying it was for his sister to strengthen her before the operation. Tiffany barely saw it, let out a mocking giggle, and said directly to her husband, without any shame, "I'm also tired, with headaches and dizziness all day, and I haven't seen anyone buy me even a vitamin." In the end, a daughter will always be a daughter, and a daughter-in-law, no matter how hard she tries, remains a stranger. Michael froze. His face turned pale. He wanted to say something, but held back. He knew that any word at that moment would only add fuel to the fire. Tiffany's attitude towards Chloe became overtly hostile. The falseness from before disappeared, replaced by undisguised contempt. When Chloe was watching a romantic movie on television, Tiffany would silently approach, grab the remote control, and change the channel to a noisy financial news channel, without saying a single word. When Chloe asked to borrow a book from the shelf, Tiffany would reply dryly, "Buy your own, I don't lend my books." Every gesture of hers seemed to want to make it clear that Chloe was an intruder, someone who had come to take away the affection that belonged to her. Chloe, my dear daughter, understood everything, but chose silence. She only smiled sadly, a forced and painful smile, and walked away. But I knew her heart was bleeding inside. One afternoon I found her crying alone on the balcony. Her shoulders were trembling after receiving a brutal offense from Tiffany. She called her a parasite. I approached, hugged her from behind. I couldn't say anything more than, "I'm sorry, honey." Chloe quickly wiped her tears, looked at me, and tried to smile. "It's okay, Mom. I'm really fine. As long as we can save my sister, it's worth enduring a little." Her words broke my heart. Michael and I lived in a state of constant guilt. Every taunt, every hurtful look from Tiffany was like an invisible stab piercing us. We knew we were cruelly hurting Chloe, using her as a shield in a play we ourselves had staged, but we couldn't tell the truth. We just kept telling ourselves that we had to resist, that if Tiffany agreed to the surgery, if the girl was safe, it would all have been worth it. At that moment, we would kneel, ask for forgiveness, and explain everything. Our endurance reached its limit one weekend. After so much effort, we had finally gathered the necessary money. At lunch, Michael tried to appear cheerful and announced, "I've already paid for Chloe's operation. The hospital scheduled it for next week." Tiffany, holding a spoon, froze. She suddenly stood up and threw the spoon on the table. A sharp clank broke the forced silence. She looked at Michael furiously, her eyes overflowing with rage. Then she looked at Chloe and me and, in a sharp voice full of resentment, said, "How nice. Here, money flies to take care of strangers. Did you ever think about me? About our family? About our future? Or am I just an incubator for you?" With that, she turned, went up to her room, and slammed the door shut with desperate fury. She didn't come down for dinner that night. I knew that in that dark room, her resentment had already reached its peak. She was convinced that we, her own family, had secretly allied to give everything to Chloe. The warm scent of cinnamon and the soft perfume of the Christmas pine decorated in the corner of the living room brought me crashing back to a cruel reality. The soft melodies continued to play, but now they seemed out of place, almost a mockery. All the curious gazes of the guests were fixed on us, turning the cozy corner of the living room into a stage of naked tragedy. The confusion on Tiffany's face lasted only an instant. It was quickly replaced by a defiant, hardened expression. She no longer froze at my question. She let out a sarcastic laugh, full of bitterness and conviction. "How long are you going to keep acting, Mom?" Her voice was sharp, directed at me. "You and him, and Chloe too. Your whole family conspired to deceive me, to secretly pass money to her. Do you think I didn't notice? I heard everything. And now that everything's out in the open, you still think you can invent some absurd story that this money was to cure someone else? Sorry, but I'm no idiot." Every word of hers was like a hammer blow to Michael's chest. My son had already endured too much. The burden of his wife's illness, the pain of having to lie, the anguish of seeing his sister humiliated, and now this cruel and unjust accusation. His last thread of patience snapped. "Enough!" Michael roared, a cry full of desperation and pain that drowned out the music and murmurs. The entire room fell silent. He let go of Tiffany's hand, took a step back, and looked at her with bloodshot eyes. "It was for your treatment, Tiffany, for you." The defiant smile on Tiffany's lips froze. She blinked several times, as if she couldn't process what she had just heard. All her security and pride collapsed in an instant. "What? What are you saying? You're kidding, right? Is this another trick to cover up what you did?" But seeing Michael's shattered face and Chloe's tear-filled eyes standing like a statue in the background, she knew it was no joke. I didn't say another word. Tears meant nothing anymore, and any explanation was useless. Only the truth could put an end to this madness. I turned and walked quickly to the study, where I had kept the medical file in the locked drawer. I took out the documents, well protected in a light blue plastic folder. I returned to the living room, went directly to the glass coffee table, where Tiffany was barely standing, and dropped the folder with force. The dry thud of the file against the glass cut through the suffocating silence. "Open it, and see for yourself." My voice trembled, not from fear, but from rage and pity for my stubborn daughter-in-law. "Open your eyes wide and read every word." I pointed to the file, my voice broken. "The name on those papers is Tiffany Davis, not Chloe Johnson. The one with ovarian cancer is you. The one who needs urgent surgery this week is you. All of us, me, Michael, even Chloe, whom you despise so much, had to lie. We had to endure your selfishness and cruelty all this time for one reason, so you wouldn't collapse from fear. We were afraid you'd refuse treatment, so we staged this painful play. Do you understand now?" Tiffany, trembling, reached for the file. Her long, carefully painted fingers trembled so much she couldn't even turn the cover. Finally, she managed. Her eyes fixed on the first page, where the exam result with the diagnosis was printed in large letters: epithelial ovarian carcinoma. Her face turned white as a sheet, without a drop of blood. Her red lips began to tremble, to move without being able to utter a word. The glass of red wine she still held in her hand slipped abruptly. The sound of the glass breaking on the white ceramic floor was so sharp, so heartbreaking. The glass shattered, and the dark red liquid spread across the floor. Tiffany's world, and ours too, shattered with that explosion. That Christmas Eve ended in panic and absolute silence. The last guests hurried away, taking whispers and uncomfortable glances with them, leaving us alone in the middle of a shattered house with half-eaten fancy food, decorative ribbons that now seemed ridiculous, and a dark, dried red wine stain on the floor, like an old wound. None of us could sleep that night. Tiffany sat motionless on the sofa, curled up in her velvet dress, once elegant, now completely out of place. Her eyes were empty, lost in the air, and every now and then her entire body trembled with shock and fear. Michael was beside her, not daring to touch her. He just looked at her with a mixture of pain and desperation. Chloe and I cleaned in silence, picking up the remnants of the party, also picking up the broken pieces of our own family. The next morning, as the first rays of sun came through the window, I was the first to act. I didn't allow myself to fall. I didn't allow myself to cry. Tears at that moment were a useless luxury. I went directly to Michael's room, where he was still slumped on the edge of the bed from the night before. I put my hand on his shoulder and shook him hard. "Get up, son. Sitting here crying isn't going to save her. Open the computer and log into your bank account. We need to find out where the money went." My voice sounded so cold and firm that even I was surprised. Under my pressure, Michael sat down, swaying, in front of the desk and turned on the laptop. His hands trembled as he typed the password. On the screen appeared the transaction history. A long list of expenses, irrefutable proof of an unrestrained madness. An enormous sum transferred to Lupita's Dream Parties event company. A high payment to Emerald Jewelers, and a series of purchases at luxury clothing stores, names I only knew from magazines. I felt as if someone was squeezing my heart. A human life had been exchanged for all that. I said nothing more. I went for my coat and car keys. "Stay here and take care of Tiffany. Don't leave her alone. I'll handle the rest." My first destination was the house of Mrs. Davis, Tiffany's mother. I rang the doorbell incessantly, impatiently. It took her a while to come out, still in her pajamas, looking sleepy, but with a sparkle of happiness in her eyes, as if she was still savoring the birthday party her beloved daughter had organized for her. Without a greeting, I put my phone in front of her face with the bank statement on the screen. "Look at this," I said in a dry voice. Yesterday's lavish party, that gold bracelet you're showing off on social media. It was all paid for with your own daughter's life." Mrs. Davis fell silent. Her smile froze as I told her the whole tragedy. The cancer diagnosis, our lie, and Tiffany's reaction. The joy on her face turned to horror, then to deep shame. She stammered, "No, it can't be, my daughter." Then she ran to her room and returned with the shiny bracelet in her hand, the same one Tiffany had worn the night before. That gift she said she had bought with her bonus. This is what she gave me. My God, what have I done? At that moment, we no longer had time for blame or reproaches. There was a common enemy, invisible but cruel, threatening to take our daughters from us. Time. We had to act now. The first step to recovering Tiffany's life was to go to Emerald Jewelers. The owner, a fat, grumpy man, frowned when we told him we wanted to return the bracelet we had bought the day before yesterday. The man carefully examined the bracelet for a moment and bluntly stated, "Gold that has left the store can only be repurchased at the price of used gold. It loses 2/3 of its value." I gritted my teeth, looked at Mrs. Davis. She nodded through tears. "We accept." Then we went to the event organizing company. In their office, there were still some loose balloons from Mrs. Davis's party. After a heated discussion, the manager only agreed to return a small part of the deposit, arguing that the event had already taken place and all staff and food costs had already been paid. The last stage was a race against time through several shopping malls. Mrs. Davis and I, two middle-aged women, had to go from brand-name clothing store to store with the dresses and shoes still tagged in hand, lowering our heads to explain our situation and ask for a refund. In some places, they showed empathy and agreed to reimburse us. In others, they were blunt. Only in exchange for another product was possible. Every time I heard, "I'm sorry, it's store policy," my heart sank. Every dollar we didn't recover was a bit less hope for Tiffany. At the end of the day, almost night, we sat exhausted in the car, physically and emotionally destroyed. With trembling hands, I counted the little cash we had and checked the refunds that had been credited to the card. I did the calculations. We only had a little more than half of the money we had worked so hard to raise. Half of Tiffany's life expectancy had evaporated in parties, jewelry, and luxurious, superficial clothing. I looked at the money in my hands and felt a heartbreaking pain. I knew it wouldn't be enough, and time waits for no one. To cover the enormous deficit, I had to empty every last cent from my retirement savings account, the one I promised myself never to touch. Chloe, poor thing, also had to borrow from everyone, swallowing her pride to quickly ask friends and coworkers for money. Finally, one afternoon, when Michael delivered the full amount of the surgery advance to the hospital's financial office, I could finally breathe a sigh of relief, although my chest still ached. We had the money, but we had lost too much valuable time. The day Michael admitted Tiffany to the hospital, she walked like a ghost. She no longer cried, said nothing, just remained silent while her husband and the medical staff arranged everything, from changing her into the oversized patient gown to drawing blood for tests. I watched my daughter-in-law, who days before was the queen of the party and now was pale, emaciated. Her eyes were sunken, dark circles under them, and her gaze empty. Regret and fear were consuming her faster than the cancer itself, growing in her body. The surgery took place on a rainy, gray Wednesday morning. Our entire family was present: me, Michael, Chloe, and Mrs. Davis. We sat on the cold metal benches in front of the surgical area, not speaking to each other. The atmosphere was so tense it could be cut with a knife. Michael paced back and forth in front of the green operating room door, his hands clasped, so nervous his knuckles were white. Chloe was by my side, squeezing my hand tightly. It was cold and damp. Every now and then, from the other side, I heard Mrs. Davis's muffled sobs, that woman who could now only pray in silence. Time in that hospital corridor seemed to pass in a very different way. Slow, heavy, and so suffocating it was hard to breathe. Every time the operating room door opened, all four of our hearts stopped for an instant, only to sink in disappointment when it was just a nurse hurrying in or out for more instruments or a blood bag. The sound of gurney wheels echoed down the hallway, the monotonous voice of the loudspeaker calling other patients. All those impersonal sounds only increased the tension that tortured us to the limit. An hour, 2, 4, 5 hours passed, long as a century. Finally, that green door opened. The chief of surgery, a middle-aged man with a broad forehead and eyes marked by fatigue, came out and slowly removed his mask. We all stood up at the same time, surrounding him with pleading eyes full of hope. He looked at us one by one with a compassionate gaze and stopped at Michael. We did everything we could. He began with that phrase, "No one in the world wants to hear from a surgeon." My heart sank. The tumor was larger than initially thought. The delay of almost 2 weeks gave it time to grow and begin to invade nearby tissues. It was very difficult. He paused, as if to prepare us for what was to come. His voice lowered, laden with gravity. We managed to save her life. The main tumor was completely removed, but to ensure maximum safety and prevent any risk of relapse, we had to completely remove her uterus and both ovaries. The entire corridor filled with a deadly silence. Michael stumbled, had to lean against the cold wall to keep from collapsing. Chloe could no longer hold back. She burst into heartbreaking sobs, and I felt my legs buckle, my head swimming. My daughter-in-law would live, thank God, but she would never be able to have children. The dream of grandchildren, of children's laughter filling this house, had vanished forever. The price for her envy and foolishness was too high. When the nurses took Tiffany out of intensive care, she was still unconscious from the anesthesia. We gathered around the bed. We looked at her in silence, her pale face, cracked lips, and all those tubes stuck in her thin arm. Michael leaned down and took her cold hand. He rested his head on the edge of the bed. His broad shoulders trembled, and he cried. For the first time since receiving the bad news, he allowed himself to cry with all the weakness and pain. That afternoon, when she had already woken up, it was the surgeon himself who informed her of her situation. We waited outside, not daring to enter, but we heard no crying. When the doctor came out, she didn't call for us either. She just stood there with her back to the cold, white hospital wall. She didn't scream, didn't complain, didn't say a single word. Her silence was more terrifying than any lament or reproach. After Tiffany was discharged, the house we used to call home became strange and suffocating. There were no longer screams or arguments, but the guilty silence that covered everything was 1,000 times more frightening. Every ornament, every expensive garment in the closet seemed like silent witnesses to an irreparable mistake. We bumped into each other in silence, ate in silence, and pain devoured us from within little by little. To give my children space to heal their wounds, and also to soothe my tired soul, I decided to move in with Chloe to the old family home. That place was full of memories of my late husband, with the rose garden he cared for so meticulously, the place where I always found peace after every storm. Since then, our life entered a new order, a sad order. Every day, Michael continued to go to work like a robot, but he organized his time with great precision, as if it were a programmed obligation. At noon, he would return home to have lunch with Tiffany. He would remind her to take her medicines on time and ask a couple of perfunctory questions. In the afternoon, after leaving work, he would stop by Chloe's and my house to share a real family dinner. Only there, with his mother and sister, could my son truly breathe. He could exhale in relief without having to face his wife's guilt-filled silence, without looking into those eyes always laden with remorse. Through Michael's broken accounts, I learned that Tiffany was changing little by little. She no longer wore makeup, she didn't buy new clothes. The designer dresses were stored in a corner of the closet, covered with a dust cloth. She started to research and learn to cook nutritious dishes for cancer patients. She cleaned the house in silence again and again, even where it was already sparkling. She did everything in silence, as a way of atoning for her guilt, a kind of silent penance, but she still hadn't had the courage to call me or visit Chloe and me. Shame and remorse had built too large an invisible wall. She didn't have the courage to face us, especially Chloe, whom she had hurt the most. Time continued its silent course like a river. Autumn, with its yellow leaves covering the yard, passed, and winter arrived with the first cold winds, and then Christmas came again exactly 1 year after that dreadful night. 1 year after my family broke and reassembled in pain. On the afternoon of December 24th, while Chloe and I decorated the small tree in the living room together, Michael arrived. This time he didn't come in for dinner as usual. My son seemed restless. He stood at the door and handed me a small box, carefully wrapped in dark red paper, and a white card. "It's from Tiffany for you," he said in a low voice with some doubt in his tone. Then he left quickly, as if he feared facing my emotions. Chloe and I sat by the softly crackling fireplace. I placed the box on my lap and slowly began to unwrap it. Inside was a cream-colored wool scarf, carefully and dedicatedly knitted. I noticed that some stitches were clumsy, a little uneven, but that very detail moved me. I knew Tiffany had dedicated a lot of time and effort to knitting it with her own hands. A woman accustomed to silk and luxury now patiently sat knitting stitch by stitch. My hands trembled a little as I opened the card. There were no elegant words or empty phrases, only a few lines written in a handwriting that was no longer confident or decorative as before. The writing trembled, and in some places the ink had run a little, as if tears had fallen on the paper. "Dear Mom, I don't dare to ask for your forgiveness. I just want to thank you. I am alive thanks to you, Michael, and Chloe. I love you. Merry Christmas, Tiffany." Reading those words, I instinctively brought a hand to my mouth, but I couldn't hold back the tears that began to roll down my cheeks. They weren't tears of pain or anger, but of relief, of understanding. Chloe, sitting beside me, put an arm around my shoulders and hugged me in silence to comfort me. Outside the window, the first snowflakes of the season really began to fall, soft and white, covering the garden with a pure blanket. I looked at the warm flames flickering in the fireplace and then down at the card in my hands. A smile slowly formed on my lips, a smile with the bitter taste of the past, but also with the warmth of hope and forgiveness. It turns out that after all the storms, what heals a heart is not oblivion, but compassion. Perhaps this is the most meaningful Christmas gift I have ever received in my entire life. After all the losses, sacrifices, and torments, I understood that true love is not the sweet words spoken when everything is going well, but the patient silence during stormy days, the choice to forgive when the heart is already broken, and the courage to put another's life above one's own pride. The story of revenge I have just shared with you is not about a settling of scores between people, but about a brutal battle against the selfishness, envy, and pride we all carry within us. I paid a high price with my own daughter's suffering, with entire sleepless nights, only to then realize that only compassion and sincerity can truly save a person. If it weren't for love, if we didn't believe in redemption, we wouldn't have been able to get through it. And if anyone asked me what the most valuable lesson I learned was, I would say this: sometimes forgiving is also a form of revenge, the noblest of all. A revenge against indifference, against arrogance that awakens the dormant conscience within a person. The story you have just heard has changed names and places to protect the identity of those involved. We are not telling this to judge, but with the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are silently enduring within their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you keep silent to maintain peace? Or would you dare to face everything to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion on this story of stories that hurt, or any suggestions you have for improving our content. God always blesses, and I am sure that courage will lead us to better days. Right now, on the final screen, I will leave 2 of the channel's most beloved stories. I am sure they will surprise you.